excited. I just wanted to shout it from on top of a mountain, but I didn't have a mountain. I had a newsroom and a camera. Look, I report the news. That's what I do. And today's top story, in Ron Burgundy's world, read something like this. I love Veronica Corningstone.
And the Sermon on the Mount is an inaugural address of Christ's kingdom coming, right? And there will be a feast. Maybe there will be ice cream. Maybe it'll look a little bit like this, and we'll get crazy and fun. Who knows? But Jesus is introducing in the Sermon on the Mount the next great era of grace, and it's not only great; it's eternal. It's an eternal grace period that we are going to be entering into if we are part of the Beatitudes, if we resonate with the description of the Beatitudes, if we have opened up our hearts to God enough for him to change our ways, to change our life, we will be a part of this kingdom one day. In Matthew's gospel, that's what he calls it, but Matthew literally lived and walked with Jesus. He was a disciple of Christ, and so he saw Jesus fulfilling prophecies. He saw Jesus literally like live streamed, well, not even live streamed, like live in person, fulfilling the prophecies of the Old Testament, live in person. And so he's writing this narrative, he's writing this story about Jesus and his experience with him, his life and his ministry. And he has some very, very interesting things that he puts together in the gospel that are very intentional for us to find. And this gospel is full of callbacks to Moses, full of callbacks to the Old Testament and its prophecies. It's even, if you really study it, it is broken up into 5 sections that parallel the first 5 books of Moses. The first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And there are 5 sections in the book of Matthew, and one of them is those 2 chapters, the Sermon on the Mount. And what he is doing, why I say Moses, why he's doing these callbacks to Moses, is Jesus he's creating a new story that is paralleling Jesus as the new Moses. If you don't know who Moses is at all, or you do kind of know who Moses is, who Moses was and his role was to lead the Israelites, God's people in the Old Testament, to the promised land. And now Jesus, in this new story, he is not really leading us to a promised land. Perhaps his kingdom will be geographically located in the promised land, but what he's really doing is he is ushering in a new kingdom for new Jesus people, kingdom people, to be a part of, to inhabit his kingdom that is coming. Another thing that Matthew does is he writes fulfillment formulas into his book, into this story. Fulfillment formulas are like, and the next slide here, he uses this 10 times in this book. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet saying, and it was followed by an Old Testament quote. Again, like I said, Matthew watched Jesus live. So he's seeing Jesus, Matthew is, fulfilling these prophecies from the Old Testament. And in Matthew 5:17, Jesus says, "Don't think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill." He came to fulfill these things written long ago about the Messiah, about the Christ, about the Son of God. And Matthew's like, everybody that will read this today while I'm alive and sometime in 2021 in this room, you're reading what happened. You're reading that I saw Jesus live, the Son of God, the Messiah, the Christ, and he was the true interpreter of the Old Testament law and prophets. He was the one who actually fulfilled the prophecy and purpose of these Old Testament writings. And as Moses, again, a parallel to Moses goes up Mount Sinai, right? To receive the 10 commandments from God on stone tablets to bring to the people. As Moses goes up the Mount Sinai to get the 10 commandments from God, Jesus goes up this mount, and he is not receiving stone tablets that he's going to write and bring to people. He is writing 8 blessings on the hearts of people. If you've been here the past few weeks, I've been saying that God plants his kingdom in the hearts of people a lot lately. God plants his kingdom in the hearts of you guys as Christ followers. And you carry it out on this earth until kingdom comes, right? Well, Jesus is bringing these 8 blessings to those who resonate with them. And he's writing these blessings on the hearts of people, not on stone tablets. We're going to read the Beatitudes all together once, and then we're going to break them down a little bit piece by piece before we get out of here. And again, this is like the 10 Commandments paralleled with the 8 Beatitudes, the 8 blessings. And it starts out, and we'll have a couple of screens here for this because there's a runoff into the last couple of verses. It starts off when he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs." And then it goes on to say, "You are blessed when they insult you and persecute you and falsely say every kind of evil against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, because your reward is great in heaven, for that is how they persecuted the prophets who were before you." And so, unlike Ron Burgundy in Anchorman, who says, "I don't have a mountain, I had a newsroom and a camera to shout my love for my loved one," Veronica Corningstone, Jesus has a mountain that he's shouting his love for his blessed ones from, to his disciples who come near. And this is not a list or a description of certain works that you have to perform or people that you have to try to be, right? This is not saying what you might think, oh, if I am merciful, God will bless me. Oh, if I am a peacemaker, God will bless me, right? If I hunger and thirst for righteousness, then God will bless me. These are not if-then statements. This is not like, if you do this, then Jesus will bless you and he'll be very happy with you. No, it's actually the opposite. This is actually the opposite. Jesus is saying, he's talking about the identity he's already given those who believe in only him, who have made room in their hearts for him. That's the only work, if you can even call that a work. Just people who make enough room in their heart for God. These are the people who will inherit God's favor. This is not blessings about formulas to be blessed or behaviors to emulate, right? Jesus is giving a description in this list of the kinds of people who will populate his kingdom one day. And another feature here, if you could go back one slide, another writing feature or literary device that Matthew is using here, why it's listed like this, is an inclusio. You ever heard of that? Sounds like a Harry Potter spell, kind of. It's an inclusio. And why? It's this bracket that's including every piece here. So every piece between the first blessing and the 8th blessing is like a puzzle piece that is building toward what Jesus looks like, toward what the Christian life looks like. You might think, oh, we could just like separate these out and dissect them, and like some people are poor in spirit, some people are humble, some people are merciful, some people are peacemakers, and like that's what they're best at. No, this is a full puzzle. You ever get a puzzle and then you're like, you take it out and you need a couple people to actually help you by like day 3 because you're like, definitely doesn't look like the picture on the box yet, right? And you finally get that done after a few days or whatever, and it looks like the picture on the box. These are all puzzle pieces to one picture. They're aspects to a whole Christian life. That's what the Beatitudes are. And it starts with the top bracket or the top sandwich of the bread in the inclusio being, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And then for the kingdom of heaven is theirs, right at the bottom. Everything in between is an aspect to the whole of the Christian life. We are to express who God is together, where he has us living, so that people out there see us and they go, whoa, that looks like God. I'll tell you 1 John 4:12. It's one of my favorite verses. It says, no one has ever seen God, but if we love each other, God lives in us, and his love is brought to full expression in us. So when we start to love each other like God, and we are the blessed ones, when we are hungering and thirsting for righteousness and really nothing else, that's what matters in life. Paul himself says, I turned away from all the stuff in the past in my life that I thought was valuable because everything else in life was garbage, is what his Greek word, and even more of like a curse word than that, but I'll just say garbage. He says everything else is garbage in life compared to knowing Christ. And so those of us that love Christ and put him first, and we only make room for him, we love each other with his love, then we express who he is. And those around start to see, oh, that's what God looks like, if they've never seen him. David De Silva also writes, just as God sends blessings of rain and sun on the whole world, so God's children are to participate in God's work of bringing blessing, extending favor and mercy as God extends them. We're to replicate God's favor, God's mercy, God's love. How he extends that to us, we extend that and we express that, and people start to see what God looks like. Again, this isn't a formula. This isn't, hey, emulate these things in the inclusio, in that set of blessings, and then you'll be blessed, right? This is an identity. The word here, the Greek word that Matthew has written this with is makarios. That's the original word for the word blessed. So it's not blessed like you do this and you'll be blessed. This is a blessing like something that's already happened. Because Christ is going to the cross, because he knows who you are, because he knows that you're going to follow him, he knows who is going to be a true disciple, and he knows who's going to get the inheritance from him and with him. So this is a blessing that's already passed. It's already an inheritance given, already promised to those who know who and whose they are, who have received a new identity in Christ. Those who have received his calling toward him. So these are not random call-outs who Jesus would like to hang out with in his kingdom for eternity. This is not Jesus writing like, these are the kinds of people that I just want to hang out and make my friend group in the kingdom of heaven. This is not Jesus like putting on his profile I want to be with somebody who loves long walks on the beach and pineapple juice and Australian shepherds. Swipe right if you're with me. Like that. That's not what Jesus is writing. Like, these are the kinds of people I want. No, it's the kinds of people who open their hearts to him. The only call out, the only thing that Jesus would be talking about with these blessed people, not a random thing, not a profile change to tell you what he wants. It comes from Isaiah 61, the Messiah's Jubilee. Isaiah was, again, another prophet from the Old Testament who wrote about Jesus. And the Messiah's Jubilee is his vision of Christ, or the Messiah's good news for the poor that will happen for eternity. A grace period that is coming for people like this, who have received an identity in Christ, who are these blessed ones. Anybody familiar with that term, Jubilee? Not quite yet, kind of, sort of. Okay, so in the Old Testament, in ancient Israel, the year of Jubilee, or AKA the year of the ram's horn, a ram's horn would signal that 50 years have gone by. Every 50 years, once every 50 years, the slaves would be freed. Those who were impoverished because they just couldn't make rent or whatever you would call it back then, they had to give up their property and their land just to make ends meet, or whatever you'd call it. In that day, they had to give away everything just to have a little bit of money to live on. They would get all of their property and land back. They would receive it all back. It's a full grace period once again. Those who were in debt, their debts were all canceled, right? You might have heard your parents like trying to get on IRS.gov a lot these past 2 years to get some sort of check, right? Some sort of grace period check so we could kind of pay the mortgage and stuff like that these past couple of years. Well, imagine every 50 years, everything is erased. Every debt, if you're a slave, you're freed. If you've given up everything just to get by these past years, imagine like a 50-year-old who's gone his entire life with nothing given to him, and then that ram's horn signals, and then boom, gets everything handed back to him. Gives me the chills just thinking about it. You get everything back. It's this major grace period. And then you think about how much more chills you get thinking about Jesus in this Sermon on the Mount, in this inaugural kingdom address, how he is preaching the final great era of grace is dawning with him. He has ushered in, or he is ushering in his kingdom right now in the hearts of people that follow him. There will be a grace period. There will be a massive jubilee, like Isaiah saw in this vision, for those following this Messiah. And so we'll break down the Beatitudes a little more here, piece by piece, until we get out of here. And so Jesus, again, doesn't have a newsroom and a camera, but he has a mountain that he is shouting his love to those who will follow him and who they will be like in his kingdom. This is what they will look like. Matthew 5:3. We can go ahead and put the whole thing back up there. Or they might be, it might be piece by piece. Perfect. I was smarter than I thought. Awesome. Matthew 5:3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. When we hear poor in spirit or mourning, as we see in verse 4, we get the Christian Western individualism idea, like, oh, the sad people in my neighborhood will be comforted in heaven one day, right? It's a very simple thing, but there's more to it. It's so much more expansive than just the sad will be comforted one day in heaven. The Greek word here that's used for poor in spirit, is protos. Protos. What word comes to mind for you in English when you see that? Anything? Yeah? Not photos. Protos. Prototype. There you go. Prototype, right? Anybody else think of that? Or was everybody just, the sugar high went away? Oh, yeah, it was fake ice cream, so come on, you have no excuses. Prototype. Okay, so what's that mean? It's meaning that we're completely empty and dependent upon someone else for provision. Right? A prototype isn't really working yet, is it? It's the first thing. It's like the original creation that needs the next pieces. It needs the next stages to be put together to actually function. We are to be the protos for God. We're to be completely empty so he can start working on the next stage, our new life, our new identity. So the Christian is the prototype of Jesus' emptiness. If you know Jesus' story, he left glory, he left heaven, he left a throne, right? The Christmas story, he became a baby, he was born in a manger, right? And it's not your nativity scene, cute little, looks like a car seat, but made out of hay. No, he was born in a manger, which meant he was born in a feeding trough. He went to the lowest of low to come to us, to come to be human, to see what it was like to not even be a wealthy human, but to be poor in spirit here. And we're to have this emptiness, the emptiness of Christ, who not only was born in that, but then lived his life telling people about the kingdom and then went to the cross for sin and to resurrect on our behalf. So we're to be this prototype. We're supposed to be empty, having room in our hearts for God, right? And we'll find out a little bit more about that in a couple verses. And then Matthew 5:4-5 says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth." Humble or meek is the other word in other translations. You ever heard of meek? The word meek, M-E-E-K, not meek mill. Meek as in humble. Yeah, very good. And meek doesn't mean weak, does it? Good. Nobody thought that. Meek doesn't mean weak. It means you don't take advantage of your position. If God is saying, you're going to be seated on the throne with me, you are inheriting this kingdom with me, we don't take advantage of that position. We are grateful for that position. But the scribes and Pharisees, if you're kind of familiar with them in the New Testament, the religious leaders, people that were supposed to lead the community toward God, they would teach all the stuff because they memorized those 5 books of Moses and more. Like, they were way more into the scriptures than even I was, and this is my full-time job, right? They were full-time all the time, studying and memorizing the Old Testament, those first 5 books. They knew it back to front. They knew everything about it, but they wouldn't practice what they taught, and that's exactly what Matthew 23, 2-3 says. The scribes and Pharisees are seated in the chair of Moses. They were supposed to lead others towards what God looked like, towards expressing what God looked like in their community. But they didn't do it. They took advantage of their position. That's why we find out that Jesus is the true interpreter of the law and the prophets. He's the true one to fulfill the prophecy, because none of us could do it. Even if they had the title of a religious leader back then, they could not do it. They ended up taking advantage of their position. Verse 3, therefore do whatever they tell you and observe it, but don't do what they do, because they don't practice what they teach. You've heard that, right? Practice what you preach? Absolutely. They didn't practice what they preached. It says, listen to what they know about, because they memorized it all, but don't do what they do, because they take advantage of their position. And Jesus is the real one who gets to sit on the seat of Moses. He's the real one who gets the throne forevermore. Even his disciples, though, fumble into this. You might not know this, but the disciples ended up asking Jesus, and 2 of them brought their moms out instead and sent their moms up to Jesus to say, hey, can my sons over here, can they be the ones that sit in your right and left hand when you get this whole glorious kingdom throne one day? Like, we believe that you're king. We believe that you're the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, but you've got to have a couple like right and left hand mans, right? Can my sons have those positions? And all the disciples came up and said, who's the greatest among us? Yeah, who is the greatest? Who is your favorite, Jesus, of us? And who's going to sit on your right and left? And he says nothing about giving that chair to anybody. Here's what he says in Matthew 18:3 to his disciples. Truly I tell you, unless you turn and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. At Thanksgiving, most of the time, kids get a little table, right? They get the kids' table over in the other room. Jesus is like, hey, you get to sit at the little table over there. That's who's greatest. And you're like, in our tradition, in our mind, we're like, wait, what? The cool adults who play cards and hang out and talk about cool stuff because they have life experience. They get to sit up at the big table. And if you're really cool, you get to sit at the end of the table. And Jesus is like, no, don't worry about that. You get to sit where the little children are, because that's who we are like. We're humble, we're meek, we're poor in spirit. We don't care about this earth anymore. We do, but we want to see the kingdom come. And we want to see it absolutely wrap it up and make it new. That's what we're about. And what this comes from, this verse 4 through 5 comes from Psalm 37:11, which says, but the humble will inherit the land and will enjoy abundant prosperity. It's always calling back to the Old Testament. We can't have both without the other. All right, verses 6 through 8. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. So again, you can't hunger and thirst without making room, right? You have to have a fast in your life. You have to be hungering and thirsting after God's righteousness by being empty, by making room in your heart for God. And then those who practice mercy are awarded it. How hard is that right now in your cancel culture? You see everybody getting canceled right now? If you cancel somebody, then you get canceled because somebody's got their receipts on you. They'll find the tweets, they'll find the posts, they'll find everything. I saw it all the past couple of days where somebody found what somebody said in 2013, and now like they lost their job. Like it's just absolutely insane. There's this justice factor that everybody has to have to cancel somebody else. But we are called to show mercy, to be merciful and to receive mercy. It seems impossible right now. And then last, the pure in heart comes from Psalm 24, referencing the people who seek to ascend the mountain of the Lord and stand in his holy place one day and see God's glory, return to the temple and make all things new. Return and make heaven and earth one. That's what they're seeking up the mount in Psalm 24. It says, the one who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not appealed to what is false, who's not trying to cancel everybody, who's not what Romans 12:2 says, one of my favorite verses, and you've probably heard it if you've been here before. Don't conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. You want to do the will of God. You want to be close to God. You want to know his will and know what he has for your life. You don't conform to the patterns of this world. You don't just do what the world is doing. You don't appeal to what is false. And who has not sworn deceitfully either. And he will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. All this says in here is you seek and God gives. You seek and God gives. There's no work here. If I seek God and I want him back in his rightful place on the throne over heaven and earth, then he gives, he blesses, and you receive the righteousness and his salvation. All right, number 9, the peacemaker one. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. I love this quote from Hugh Halter. I was reading Sacrilege. Some of you were in the leadership group we had, and you read Tangible Kingdom by Hugh Halter. And this is his other book, Sacrilege, and he writes, I find it interesting that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus continually references qualities we'd find in heaven. Qualities like comfort, mercy, seeing God himself. And then later, in a poignant moment with the apprentices or the disciples, he teaches them the art of peacemaking through prayer, saying to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In other words, Christ followers are to hope for, ask for, and involve themselves in activities that bring a little heavenly peace to peaceless earth. So the future promises of God, the blessings of God in the Beatitudes are restored in Jesus and for those who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, those who are longing for him to return. And we will bring a little heavenly peace to peaceless earth. And you have to be intentional about it, right? Yeah, you don't have to try to be a peacemaker, try to be merciful, try to be all those things just to be blessed. Those things are good, but that's not what he's getting at. He's getting at, do you want to be a person who is empty and being used by God here on this earth to bring a little bit of heavenly peace to it until his kingdom comes? So look at this description. Look at the Beatitudes. Can we get the whole Beatitudes up, or at least the first 8? Read those. Read those tonight. Is this description you? Have you been emptying yourself, trying to just seek God and let him have his way in your life? Are you emptying yourself so that he can be the one who makes you more than a prototype of his? All you have to do is empty yourself so that he can start to do the work. He's already started the work in you if you have believed in him, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop the day that you confess that Jesus is Lord. You continue to look like him and express who he is to your world. The next one is the end of the inclusio, the end of that sandwich. For who is the kingdom of heaven? It's theirs. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And then we go outside the inclusio. Why? Because it's no longer about you. This was about you in those first 8, but then there's a 9th one that's only about Jesus. Verses 11 and 12, he goes on to talk about this persecution. You are blessed when they insult you and persecute you and falsely say every kind of evil against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, because your reward is great in heaven. For that is how they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And so he ends with persecution, which is like, whoa, that's a scary word. I don't really feel like being persecuted. But he says, you're going to be proof that you're a true disciple of Christ, because if the only thing that you're doing in this world is not conforming to the pattern of it, and you're just trying to bless people, be merciful, be a peacemaker, be humble, be meek, what could anybody say against you? He says they're not doing anything to you. He says they're doing it because of me. He takes the whole burden off your shoulders. If there's somebody that doesn't like you because you're a Christian, because you're living the Christian life, Jesus is like, it's not about you. It's not about Lincoln. It's not about insert your name here. It's about they don't like me. They don't like me. I'll take it. So the next time you fear somebody hearing about you being a Christian, you living the Christian life, you don't have to fear that they're rejecting you. That's the whole point of this. He gives those first 8 blessings to say, this is what the people of God look like. Does that look like anybody that anybody should ever hate? No. And so Jesus says, look, you're going to be persecuted. People ain't going to like you because they don't like me. It's not about you. It's about him. It's specifically about him. And then he says, he goes so far as to say, you're kind of like the prophets of old that he spoke to literally. You're my new heralds of truth to this world, like the prophets before you. So again, I just want you to look at this description again tonight. I want you to consider that Beatitudes description. Are you one of the blessed ones? Are you making room in your heart for God? Do you have zeal for God? Are you just here to get ice cream thrown on you? It's pretty awesome. Are you just here for granola bars and Capri Suns? I hope not. I mean, those are okay. We need to have some sustenance and some snacks, but you're here to look like a blessed one of Christ, one who's truly following him. And so I hope that this starts to stir in you, if you haven't yet tonight, to start making room in your heart for God, because this is what it looks like. It doesn't look like somebody who's after convenience and comfort. It's somebody who trusts in God for comfort. It's somebody who trusts in God to make them merciful and a peacemaker, and all of these things that point to the person who has a new identity in Christ, a new identity, a new life. Like Paul said, everything else in my life is garbage compared to knowing Jesus Christ. Is that where you're at? Are you having difficulty with that being your lifestyle, your mindset? It is for all of us. But you have to work at this part of just emptying yourself so that you're more than a prototype for Jesus Christ.